thank you so much for coming to this School Choice Week event. You can't see it now, but you can see in the logos, we're thrilled to be partnering with the Michigan Association of Public School Academies, the Great Lakes Education Project, and National School Choice Week itself, who has provided these scarves to do this event. Just some facts about school choice in the state. This year, with the combination of charter school choice and public school district choice, 1 in 5 Michigan students will be attending a public school using some form of choice. And that's really something to celebrate. In many ways, we're at a tipping point where school choice is becoming more mainstream than ever. So I'm going to introduce a gentleman here today who is the director of the short documentary that you'll see. The documentary touches on a lot of different types of choice throughout the country, and I think also illustrates the need for educational choice and what it can mean to people. Something to keep in mind as you watch this is to remember that a lot of the different choices that are discussed in the film weren't available 10, 20 years ago, right? The educational options that students are benefiting from, the 100 charter school students that we have today, they're attending schools that didn't exist in Michigan 20 years ago. So I'm proud to introduce Bob Bowdon, the director of the ticket, and he'll talk a little bit about this film.
Thanks, Audrey. Appreciate that. And thank all of you guys for coming. I've been told to stand in the light here. This is the most beautiful building of the film tour that we've been in, without any question. So again, National School Choice Week is not about advocating any certain particular form of education. The idea is that different kinds of children flourish best under different kinds of educational environments, and you'll see a little bit of that in the film. And just quickly to say, because of the work of people like Audrey Spalding and Michael Van Beek and the Mackinac Center, this state has seen some of the most progress in the last 5 years of any state in the country, and we'll get into that more a little bit later. But for now, the conversation is always usually more productive after the film rather than before the film. So without further ado, this is a short film called The Ticket.
So again, thank you so much to everyone who's come out to see this important film. I used to work in St. Louis, so I know a lot of the people who were interviewed talking about educational choice there, and it really calls to mind the fact that even here in this state, we have some school districts that refuse to enroll students from other school districts, despite the fact that most school districts in this state participate in the schools of choice system. So I wanted to introduce a very special guest to talk briefly about school choice victories in the past and what we see going forward in this state. This is Senator Phil Pavlov, who was instrumental in bringing about the lift of Michigan's charter school cap in 2011. We are so happy to have him here, and I'll let him talk more. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Audrey, and it's good to be here with you today and share some of the successes that we have. But I think more importantly, we really need to be focusing on what happens tomorrow and the next day, not only to preserve the hard-fought gains that we've made in school choice for me personally, the last 4 years as the chair of the Senate Education Committee, but going back and jumping onto the shoulders of the people who really plowed this ground, going back to Governor Engler and those that helped set in motion the ability for us not only to expand and lift this arbitrary cap on charter schools, but also give students an opportunity for more dual enrollment. One of the important pieces of the legislation from 2012 was also this idea about including our cyber education and our blended learning. And every single one of these choices, I'm a firm believer that put in the hands of the parents and the student, and with a little bit of help and guidance, that ultimately they're going to make the right decision. They're going to be in charge of their students' direction, in charge of that outcome, and in many cases develop a stronger role in that education. And just to speak specifically to charters, every student is in a charter because of a decision that was made for choice. And when I look at my region, the Thumb, there's not a big concentration of charter schools. But I will tell you, the schools that have not been performing well have already set their sights on improvement. So that's ultimately helping every student in a traditional education setting, and so that raises the bar. And so when we're essentially competing for students and we're competing for that right to offer flexibility and innovation, number one, we have to deliver. And number two, we have to make our case every day going forward, because the pressure, we're going against the current of the very powerful traditional groups out there. And so when there is a letdown, or there is the political momentum that gets behind us, it's people like you that are coming to the Capitol to not only express your desire for more choice for the students in Michigan, but you're also helping me. You're like a sixth person, a sixth man on our team. And going back to the battles in 2012 when we tackled tenure and MIPSR's reform and all these things that matter to choice, it was your voice back in the community, it was your voice in the editorials, and it was your voice that was giving us the support, particularly in the Senate, to be able to complete these initiatives and to still move forward. So I understand there might be a question or two Audrey mentioned. Happy to help out.
Sure. So I'm going to invite back Director Bob Bowdon to do a brief Q&A. I know Bob has a few questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. And we will be respectful of the senator's time. I know he has a noon appointment. So thank you.
Okay. So first of all, yes, nice to meet you. You bet. Thanks for coming. So just a couple questions. First, let's talk about your past, and then we'll go to the future. The past, starting with the victory on eliminating a charter school cap in the state of Michigan. So how did that happen? What was the opposition? And quickly, our cab driver on the way here this morning said, when we explained the event we were coming to, he has four kids and one on the way, or 5 and 1 on the way? He has a wife who's 8 months pregnant. And he said, I'm just troubled about all this school choice, though, he said, because, yeah, I realize a lot of the schools aren't working well, and, yeah, they really are failing some of our kids. The oldest was 12. He said, but what do you do if the kids leave to the charters? What happens to that school that they're leaving and the kids that are left there? And you could feel from him this ambiguity, where he, on the one hand, understood the need for choice, but had this hand-wringing reaction to this sad feeling for the institution that was being abandoned. What, during your charter cap lifting debate, would you have said to a guy like that?
Well, first of all, we need to put the students first in the equation. And because they're getting potentially a substandard education, doesn't mean they should not be released to go get something better. That was the first thing. Obviously, this really comes down to a labor issue. It's a very intensive union battle. But I think one of the things that we were able to demonstrate with the help of many of you in the room was to be able to, first of all, acknowledge the 10,000 or more students that were on a waiting list, and to acknowledge that the demand was there. I think secondly, we had to take on some of the financial issues that surround choice, and to this idea that you're going to be stranding a traditional public school just because of an arbitrary jurisdiction that really outlines what a school district is in this state. It's simply a taxing authority. And so when we look at it in terms of taxing authority, we have to take a step away from that and say, are we getting the most efficiency? So along with the cap lift, we went through a whole lot of reforms. Our retirement system in our traditional public school still needs much work. We're going to come and revisit that again this year. But the finances are set up against school choice, and I guess the conversation, the rhetoric, if you will, goes against school choice because it's a desire to hold on to the past. We look at 80% of our school districts across the state that are dealing with declining enrollment, and the first finger gets pointed to choice. But that's not necessarily the right direction for that finger pointing.
Okay. So, by the way, while we're doing social media, would you mind wearing a yellow School Choice Week scarf? Let's get the senator a scarf. Okay. So the cap. There you go. The cap in the state had been how many schools before?
There was about 250 of them that were running, but now we've been able to lift, or maybe it was 150. I forget now. But we've now moved in a way where it can become unlimited. And it doesn't mean that you just hurry up and go and arbitrarily extend that cap. You know, we have to lean on our authorizers. We have to lean on our our management companies and our operators, because we have to be able to demonstrate that lifting the cap makes sense not only for the numbers, but it makes sense for the quality of education. And I was very strong in my comments once this bill had passed that we're handing this off to the community to deliver the kind of results, because we don't want to have to continue. I mean, this is going to be a generational battle as long as there's that representation between union and non-union. But if our transparency and our ability to deliver the kind of education that students in Michigan deserve, it knocks down a lot of the resistance.
In terms of the fight, a lot of people find examples of particular charter schools that may not be that great. They say, look at this one, this is a bad one. And there was recently publicity in 2014, negative publicity about some Michigan charters that people had run some data saying, look, they're bad, there's a bad one here, there's another bad one over there. So when you're told that, how do you respond to those arguments?
Well, we had the ability to point to schools that were closed. Very, very helpful, as on the other side of the education policy issue, we were dealing with the reform districts and how we deal with the traditionals that are failing. And we have done a poor job in dealing with the traditionals, yet the fingers get pointed to the few underperformers or failing charters. And failing charters have failed, just as traditionals have. But we have 150 school buildings that are on that list. We need to be able to come at it with the same intensity and same focus on the traditionals as the authorizers and operators are dealing with their set of circumstances. So that was very important.
So also, if you guys have questions in a second, just please raise your hand. And okay, I'll get you in 1 second. I have one last question before we go to that, which is about private school choice and the opportunity for education savings accounts or a tax credit scholarship to never be part of the government money, and whether that might circumvent the constitutional prohibition against vouchers in the state of Michigan, whether if the money just went from a private scholarship group, that money wasn't taxed, maybe it came from a corporation or an individual, and that private scholarship group gave a scholarship to a low-income student for a private school. Is there hope for that? Would that be constitutional?
I can't argue the constitutionality. I can tell you what's been said in the past, and I can tell you where the voters of the state of Michigan have been on vouchers. I'm not convinced that we're ready to address the voucher in that way, but scholarships are kind of an entry into that conversation. And when we talk about the cost of education, not only is it an issue with some of the private schools in our K-12 system, it's also a very big issue, and it's a big barrier to post-secondary education in this country. And you're starting to hear signals from Washington about, going after the 527 accounts that parents have been saving for. So I think if you're going to have a serious conversation on the cost of delivery of education in the state, you have to take a look at it as from a kindergarten all the way through post-secondary.
So I think that's a yes. You're saying it's possible that a tax credit scholarship would be constitutional.
Well, with Michigan's constitution, I'm not going to comment on it. All I've been heard and told about this is that it is unconstitutional.
Vouchers, right.
Yeah, but what we do is we see areas that are maybe further ahead of Michigan in the choice department in the Midwest region that have gone down the road of vouchers. So it is happening, but they may have a different constitutional construction than we have in Michigan.
Sure, and there's always constitutional amendments, and like Indiana, for example, a Midwestern state to which you refer. Sir, back there.
Your question, in the sense that you knew what my question was going to be, you essentially answered the question I was going to ask.
We stole your question from you. It was all ready to go, and that's all right. Well, we apologize for that, sir. It was an oversight. And so what is on your agenda going forward? So 2015, one last question. So yes, what would be the next thing you'd like to see in education policy in this state?
Well, we're going to work on a fair and equitable teacher evaluation system in our state. It's a big move in public policy to be not only evaluating teachers, but holding their future accountability. We want to make sure we get the evaluation process correct. We want to make sure that it's fair for the choice community as it is for the traditionals, all in an effort to have stronger educators in front of our students. So that's the thing we're going to be tackling very early. We're also looking at a letter grade system of our schools so that a parent can look objectively and who understands an A through F designation rather than a very complicated color pattern in determining what their school performance is. I think we look at that. The governor will be appointing a committee to take a very serious look at early literacy, P through third grade. The governor touched on that in his State of the State. But there's other things. I mentioned that we're not done trying to tackle the long-term retirement costs and the way that we fund our MIPSR system in the state of Michigan. That's, we've got legislation being drafted for that right now. So, I mean, we put that together, and then we'll also be participating on the School Aid Appropriations Committee. So I'll be vice chairing that committee, where we can really take a look at the budget when it comes out in February, and make sure that we get an equitable distribution across the entire K-12 sector.
Great. One thing just I would ask you guys to do is, if you're interested in following this issue more, so we work for a group called Choice Media, which is an education policy news service. It has we believe, the most robust Twitter feed on the internet regarding education news. It's just at Choice Media TV, and also our website. You can search by state. You can come up with education policy news just about Michigan, and that's at Choice Media TV. So I wanted to let you guys know that. But thanks for your attention. And here's Audrey.
And if you would like, we'll be having a choir sing in the rotunda, as well as a step team. And right before that, we think it would be really fun to get together and take a big group photo with all the students who are joining us, who you can hear in celebration of School Choice Week. So thank you again. Please join me in thanking both Bob and Senator Pavlov for attending, and thank you for your support.